Mina, she actually acts like a woman. She submits to her husband. She submits to their, the authority of Van Helsing when he's saying, hey, that you shouldn't be included. And she lets the men lead her, and then she inputs as she's allowed to.
She actually helps by being the woman, and that's how she contributes in the war. It's not that she doesn't contribute at all. She contributes a great deal. In fact, they cannot overcome. I'm reminded again of Genesis 2, right? It's not good for the man to be on his own. He cannot accomplish the defeat of chaos without her.
This isn't about a battle versus like two men, right? He says like this is a battle from another race coming about on Earth, right? Like something taking life. This isn't just like a vendetta against another guy.
Yeah.
Trying to one up him. This is literally saving humanity.
This isn't just between people who think, oh, I think women should be homemakers. Well, I think women should be in the workplace. And they're all just naturally thinking. This is a cosmic, spiritual battle and that we absolutely must win.
Welcome those who should be but are not patron members, because we have a treat for you tonight. We are bringing the after hours of the cantina to your living room, and we're going to be talking about a book that was written in what, like 1882,
1896.
1896, pretty close. So
97, but
1997.
Now I'm gonna look it up to.
I was gonna say 1897, but
1897.
I'm gonna double check.
If these are Price is Right games, I lost. Or Price is Right rules. So yeah, we're gonna discuss Dracula. We're gonna discuss.
It is 1897. Brian wins.
Oh man, who would have guessed?
Why'd you have to
Brian
tell
wins.
But yeah,
all right, that's our show for today, folks. That's
See you later. Brian wins again. Bye. We're gonna talk about themes in the book. We're gonna talk about what we liked about it, what we think the message is in there, and April's probably gonna be. She's probably going to talk the most because she's read it like as many times as Dracula's been alive. I think. How many? 7,000 times? Yeah.
7 times 7.
70 times 7. So yeah, we're going to have a good time talking about it. So welcome, sit back, relax, get a beverage, and take your shoes off. Wear a neck collar because you don't want your neck exposed. And eat lots of garlic. So let's begin. I'm going to start with saying I started this read skeptical. I like classics sometimes, but a lot of times they're just off-putting. If they're not abridged, I just can't get into some of the dialogue. The points take forever to come across. So I started the book skeptical, but I was entranced by Dracula pretty quick, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I finished in like 5 days, so I would give my hearty stamp of approval to anyone who has not read this book.
And that's all he has to say about it.
That's my opener. I mean, obviously April likes it. Brian, what did you think?
I thought it was an interesting book. It was not about the things that I thought it was about going in. Frankly, because April had an interesting fact for us before we actually read it, which was that he actually believed a lot of this stuff happened. So for me, I was going in thinking, well, if that's true, he's probably just recounting a story or making up details, but maybe there's not really a message to it that's like, universal. There might be themes or whatever, like always, because we put themes in everything, but actually a message. And once I read it or did the audiobook, I realized there was, I think in my mind, there was actually a pretty profound message to it, and really an ingenious way of using the characters to prop up that message. So I thought it was brilliantly done. Like, it definitely is a work of art as a book. It's not just some slop like Twilight or something. I mean, it's literally like if you want to read a vampire book, throw the Twilight book away and read this, because this is actually very artistically done and brilliantly done.
It pulls no punches. What's evil is evil, and what's good is good.
Yep.
Twilight, it mixes like the bad guy is misunderstood. Oh, I'm a bloodsucker, but I'll eat deer because I love you so much. No. The bloodsucker's after you, and he hates you. He hates you, and he's gonna doll you up. He's gonna speak sweet things to you. But he's gonna use you, and when he's done with you, he's gonna either kill you or turn you into himself. That's what I loved about Dracula. Is like, it just, again, it was so refreshing in the postmodern world that we live in, where evil isn't evil anymore. It's all misunderstood people. There is really no evil. It's all circumstance. And we forget that, like, no, there's just pure evil. And Dracula is pure evil. And I loved it.
Well,
go ahead.
Well, I just want to show my hand before April goes into her huge thing. But
okay, go.
Just to define down what you just said there, I would say Dracula in the book is after your women.
Well, he explicitly says that.
He does say that. Yeah.
He does, and then that's what he does, right? So because if you look at the men he confounds, he makes them crazy, he messes with their minds, but he doesn't try to turn the men into vampires.
No, because he's going to use the women to turn them.
The women will do that.
Right.
Yeah.
The women, he wants to turn the women into vampires. And then, of course, the greatest example throughout the book, the largest example, is Lucy Westenbra. And who does she go after? She goes after, what is it?
Western.
We're going to be corrected a lot tonight.
Why did I say it's not Westernbra?
No, it's Western.
Doesn't that sound like I'm like some surfer dude? Western bra.
Western bra? Come on.
No, it just sounded like a Freudian slip. You're like Western bra.
I literally thought it was Western bra. No. It's Western raw.
It's NA at the end.
Oh, Western nah. All right. Yeah. Well, I listened to the book. Maybe the guy pronounced it wrong. I don't know. But I'll blame him. but the point is who does she go after? She goes after children. And she starts basically devouring the children.
Same with the three.
Same with three women.
Right.
With the
Same with the three women. Right. And so I thought that was fascinating, because in Christian theology and biblical theology, who's the war between in the beginning? It's between the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman. It's the woman who actually is engaging in warfare with the devil through her creation, her co-creation and nurturing of children. And what's the opposite of that? It's the whore that basically is turned into someone who devours children rather than producing life. She not only devours, like she stops having her own children, but she looks to destroy the other children in the world or whatnot. So I just thought it was fascinating. Of course, that's contrast with Mina, right? Is that right? Mina.
Yeah, Mina.
What's Mina's last name when she marries Jonathan?
Mina Harker. His last name is Harker.
Yeah. What's her name before that?
Mina Murray.
All right. You can tell April has read it that a ton of times.
This is my favorite book.
But notice the contrast. She's a noble woman, faithful, super uber faithful to her love, her husband, even before she's married, which I think is key. And she's not easily turned. And of course, the men in the book who are the noble men, they actually enter in the scene to save this noble woman from being turned into a vampire or whatever, which I think is saying a lot to that whole thing. So all that to say, I think the book has a lot to say toward what the devil is attempting to do in the world, obviously in the 19th century, but even beyond, even in our own world, to turn women into whores who devour children rather than into the noble woman. And what's needed is godly men of noble character to protect women so that they don't turn that way or whatnot. Anyway, that's the big thing that I got from the book. April can agree or disagree with me, but but I actually think that that's a huge thrust of the book, and why he doesn't just turn men. It's specifically women, and it's deceiving and confusing men, making them, talk about gaslighting. I mean, just makes them this kind of, they go into this craziness and this alters reality for them, so that they don't protect the women.
Can I say one thing, April? I mean, you're probably dying to talk, but
no, it's okay.
So like, kind of to piggyback on what Brian's saying, this is the proper way to make the women strong and the hero. So, so it's very,
this is part of why it's an awesome book.
Right. Yeah. So it's very similar to Genesis 3, right? So you have Mina who's bitten. You have Eve who is bitten by a serpent, right? And she falls. And then you have the gospel promise of the serpent will bite you on the heel, but he will crush your head. And you have this, like, she's bitten and then she's strong, right? Because she's faithful. And so even in her fallenness, right, she in the end is the reason that men can figure out where he is. Yeah. And then crushes him, right? So it's like through her and through the woman, right? You can even, like, allusions like the Virgin Mary. It's through her that the Savior comes, right? And the men kind of are the example of the Savior there. But I thought that was really awesome.
Well, and I almost felt like there's an exhortation toward the men, right? Because it's what enchants men to lift up the whore and let the whore win in society, the beauty of women, right? So you have this, I found it a fascinating scene where Van Helsing goes in to kill the brides,
and he almost couldn't.
He's tempted.
He's enchanted.
Tempted by them.
So beautiful, even to the point where, and he's super faithful to his wife, who actually is, she's, she gone crazy or something. She's in a mental institution or something.
Yeah, something like that. I don't remember.
But he's still committed to her anyway. He still feels he's married. And yet he has this moment of temptation to where he even talks about loving this woman just from her beauty, right? Just because it pulls her. And it's almost this exhortation to tell
what
men,
pulls him away?
He hears
Mina.
Right. He hears Mina turning, right? Or howling, and he doesn't know if that's to save him or if it's to just because she's turning. But in the resolve to save the noble woman over the whore, he goes ahead, it breaks him out of the spell, and he kills the bride. And it's fascinating just because I think it's an exhortation to men that, like, don't be so entrapped by the beauty of women that you let whoredom reign rather than guarding women in order to preserve the nobility of the woman, because at the end of the day, the noble woman is the beautiful woman, not just the bride is beautiful on the outside, but she's going to murder you and murder your children.
Yeah. And this is part of, like, what you see with Lucy, right? Because even, like, Lucy has been connected to all of these different men, right? Through these blood transfusions. It's like this, the way that it's perceived in a Victorian time period is almost sexual. Like, that's why Arthur ultimately they want Arthur to be the one to do it because he's her fiance. But then that's not always possible. So she's had these blood transfusions with multiple men. And so you're kind of seeing that as an allegory as well of Lucy. Yes, she's virginal, but there are little clues in there of, but Lucy actually is not like Mina.
Well, I would say she's a virgin for what reason? I think it's showing the virgin who can be turned into a whore versus the virgin who cannot be, which is why we talked about kind of before the podcast a little bit. She makes that statement how she wishes she could marry all the men. And it shows that just because you're physically a virgin doesn't mean your soul is in that state. And so she's easily turned by Dracula, even when the men try to intervene. But like you say, even that, it's like multiple men that are, becoming a part of her in that way.
Like Mina has connections to all the men, but her connections to the men are the proper connections,
Right.
because
Correct.
she talks about how the men are so noble and they're brave and that they're respectable.
Yeah.
And she talks about them in almost brotherly, affectionate terms versus how Lucy refers to them.
Even Van Helsing's love for, like, because Van Helsing will say many times that he loves Mina, like, right, but it's a familial, it's like a daughter, it's like a father and a daughter love.
Well, literally, like, she's a supportive woman, right? And literally they say that if she had not collected all that information, that this would not have happened.
Yeah,
they would not have overcome basically the devil figure in the story if it had not been for her.
So can I throw out my other?
All right, it's all you. You go now. I've said everything I want to say.
Okay. I mean, yes, obviously, like, I think, yes, the theme of, like, the women and the two types of women, right? So in a Victorian time period, you're going to have the virginal woman and then the married respectable woman, and those are the only choices for women and should be the only choices. You see a lot of Dracula commentary or analysis that's like, well, no, this is trying to push back against Victorian sexual mores and say that women should be able to step out of these roles, and that's really his argument. I don't think that's true at all. I think it's really that the battle of good and evil is hinging on the sexuality of the women, of the characters, and in that there is a lot of communion imagery. I'm gonna pull a podcast, because I know they do this sometimes where they just read articles.
Snippets.
I'm just gonna read part of what I wrote about this because it'll make more sense than me trying to just ad-lib it. All right, so the distortion of the communion is one of the largest themes in Stoker's Dracula, really in all of vampiredom, as the Count extends his physical existence through the drinking of human blood, disdaining the eternal life offered through Christ's blood and his perfect sacrifice. Although Dracula possesses a kind of immortality, it is a soulless one. It is this distortion of the resurrection and the illusion of life everlasting that the vampire offers his converts. At the heart of the vampire story is the distinction between the temporal and eternal, between physical and spiritual life. While the historic vampire myth grew out of superstition and an ignorance of science, the vampire literature of the Enlightenment and post-Enlightenment periods was and continues to be deliberately centered on perversions of religion through the erotic. As such, these stories, particularly those of the 19th century, tend to focus on the conflict between the orthodox decorum of Christianity and the permissive sensuality of paganism, again, between earthly pleasure and heavenly treasure. So I do think there's a connection between the communion imagery that you have and the sexual imagery that you have, because you see this even with how is Mina, how does she fall? How is she affected? Because he literally cuts open his chest and forces her to drink his blood.
Yeah.
So, and how does she react after this? She is connected to him, so much so that they can hypnotize her and she can see or experience what he's experiencing. So there is a tying between those two things. And from a biblical perspective, there is always a tying of sexual immorality and eternal damnation. Those are connected. So in my mind, the kind of feminine ideal and the sexual themes are tied to the communion themes. They're not separate.
Well, and you can also see the fact, what does Christ ultimately do in his death that's represented by the communion is he gives life, right? What is Dracula doing, though, in order to get
false life?
He's taking it. He's taking life. So he's literally taking life from the life giver human, the woman, and which then corresponds to them taking life from the children. And so in that way, you can easily see how it's just like it's the opposite. It's the anti-communion, right? It's literally in order to feed himself, he takes human life. Whereas in contrast to Christ actually gives his life to humans, doesn't need to take anybody's life.
Well, even in the sacramental,
go ahead.
Go ahead, bro.
No, go ahead.
I was like, even in the sacramental uses in the book of relics that have power.
Mm,
One of them is obviously the communion wafer. So
yeah.
like the wafer is connected to like the Roman Catholic Church and stuff like that. The response to this, I'll use the word bastardization of communion, is actually the proper use of it, right? The one who actually gives life, and they even refer like even if we lose, right? Like they say this about Mina, even if we lose, right? She's got the mark on her forehead from the wafer as a reminder that it has to be Christ that is going to make her to reverse her state. Because they even say like this might be my plight until judgment day when God will make this right. Right. Even if we fail here, even if we don't find them. And there's like there's this pressure against like what Dracula's doing and tainting the blood and like taking where the life is, which is the blood. And then obviously Christ in the sacramental sense, which that was probably one of my few complaints in the book, is this idea of where does God's power come from?
Yeah.
How do we actually protect each other? In the end, it comes from the actions of what they do and not necessarily the relics. But I wish the relics played less of a part.
Yeah. That's my complaint with it as well.
Yeah.
Well, that is the Roman Catholicism in it, but
yeah.
but I do find it interesting then that blood paints that or paints that picture of a sacrifice.
Yeah.
And when the men then give blood to Lucy, do they give blood to Mina? They don't give blood to Mina, do they?
No,
Yeah.
they don't.
So when they give blood to Lucy, it's almost also conveying the idea that like if you are to save women like this, it's going to take sacrifice on your part. You're going to have to sacrifice your part of your life for it. You don't get to just do whatever you want, and whatnot. And
Quincy actually sacrifices his life,
right?
Because he dies at the end.
Right. Yeah.
Spoiler. Sorry.
That's another complaint I have. Okay, we'll get there.
Yeah, by gypsies.
That was such a typical American character ending, and it wasn't even that like he was slain and died. It was sort of like everything was fine. It's like, and then he looks down and it's like, oh, I didn't make it.
It was very.
That is like so iconic. Where like
there's this wild theory that Quincy was actually involved and was actually on Dracula's side, and so that they like offed him at the end so that they wouldn't find out. Yeah, it's wild. I don't buy it, but it's a wild theory.
That's what we call eisegesis right there.
Yeah. Honestly, Quincy's the only character I never connected with. And when he died, I was kind of like,
yeah.
Well, he's kind of the American cowboy or whatever, right?
He's kind of a cartoonish character. He's almost like a caricature.
You mean my Winchester?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, even with like Renfield, that whole thing is like it's a communion thing.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, I'm going to eat all, I'm going to get all the blood and then I'm going to serve my Lord and Master. I mean, he calls him his master.
I was so surprised though, because even then it's almost, and maybe, I don't know if Stoker meant to do this or not, but maybe he's trying to communicate that even the most far gone guy can turn around in the end and try to save the noble woman.
Yeah, he really did, because he loved Mina and he did not want to. He did not want to give her up.
And he sacrificed his life to try to save her.
Yeah.
See, was this book not so good?
Yeah, no, it was really. I mean, because obviously he's a total lowlife, and you're creeped out by him at first, and then he becomes this. In the end, he becomes a nobleman.
Well, you notice too, like when Mina enters, he becomes more and more sane too.
Right.
So like, noble women, right? Like it actually.
That's that part sanity. Of that. that chivalry element to it, to where women actually, noble women, make men better.
Yeah. And that was a twist for me, because I thought, at first I thought he was turning into a vampire, like he was slowly eating because he had this like blood desire, and then he had to satiate. He was getting
I thought he had actually turned him into a vampire, and that's why he needed to eat it or something.
Right.
But then you find out he didn't.
Right. Well, then it's like okay, what was promised to him? Because then obviously he's not a vampire. So did Dracula promise to make him one? Or was he just so? Was he just overwhelmed with Dracula's power? right?
Well, no,
And
do you remember what it actually does say what he promised him?
I don't remember.
He promised him like flies and animals to eat.
That's it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, he's in
promised him
an
blood.
insane asylum. That he's not really like.
Well, see, I was assuming that his insanity was like because he knew what he was going to get. Like he wanted to live forever, and he was going to do
that's
whatever.
part of it.
Well,
He
yeah,
did
that
want
is
to
part
live
of it.
forever.
He thinks that he's again by eating the blood,
Right.
He thinks that he's going to live, but at the sacrifice of all these animals or whatever and insects and whatnot.
Well, the moment I figured that out was when he tried to kill Dr. Seward, and I was like, oh, okay. He thinks that if he gets blood, that he's going to be
right.
He's trying to mimic his master or whatever.
Yeah.
But I thought as far as storytelling is concerned, the slow burn with what's the crazy guy's name?
Renfield.
Yeah, the slow burn with Renfield, because you're like, obviously he's like Gollum, right? He's gonna play a role, but you don't know what yet. And it just, I loved how slowly it built up. And even when he was in a puddle of blood on the floor, like it just broke my expectation of what he was going to be used for. Because I thought he would escape, and I thought he'd be at the end with whatever happened, right? That he would kind of like Gollum.
Well, yeah, because they kind of save him, and then it's like, oh, I guess he's saved then. And then the very next minute, he's like, Dracula like breaks his neck, and you're like, oh, okay, I guess not.
Yeah,
he's like, well, he's gone.
That's what comes from serving Dracula.
Yeah,
nothing good.
Yeah,
right. There's also like this idea that those whose master is the devil will hate him. Like they won't. He's not a master that they'll love. He's a master that they'll hate.
Yeah.
And like and then your state is that kind of insanity.
Yeah.
Okay, can I bring up one of the other themes?
Yep.
One of the other themes in this novel is this like East versus West, or science versus religion, naturalism, materialism versus supernaturalism. And this is like, when this is the constant thing with Van Helsing, and I can't remember exactly what the quote is, but something to the effect of like, if science can't explain it, then it says there's nothing to explain. And you see this in the beginning when Jonathan is going to the castle, and they're all, all of these local peasants are crossing themselves, and they're, trying to hand him rosary beads. And as a Protestant, Jonathan Harker's like, okay, I don't really want to use these things, but okay, I guess, they seem really adamant that I take this.
Yeah.
He doesn't believe it, right? He's from London. He's in a very Western post-Enlightenment context. He doesn't believe in the superstitions. He doesn't believe in monsters and demons and any of these things. So there is this kind of shifting, because in the Victorian time period, there was still a real fear of vampires, and definitely before this period. We think it's kind of cartoonish now because it's been so overplayed. We don't realize that the vampire was actually a real fear. People did think that this was real. So when I say, that part of the context of this novel is that Bram Stoker said that it was true. In the preface to the Icelandic edition, he says that these events were real, and his editor did not want to publish it under that condition. He wanted to say that it was fiction. His editor did. That you see kind of this, like, this novel is kind of caught in a time period where things are changing. The Industrial Revolution is happening. This is pre-World War I. Things are shifting, but there's still this kind of like force between East and West, between what is real and what is not.
Yeah, I remember reading in a book when I was younger how people, and this is a literal historical thing, where people actually drove stakes through corpses because they
did.
were afraid that they were going to rise from the dead, maybe as vampires and whatnot.
People actually believed this. This wasn't, we kind of laugh it off like, well, no one believes in that. No, people believed this was true.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too, is as you kind of like look at how Van Helsing very slowly leads these guys to what he seems to know almost in the beginning.
Yeah.
And you're kind of like, dude, just tell them, like, it's a vampire.
But they won't believe. They won't
Right.
believe him.
Right. And so you realize, oh, okay, these are Enlightenment people.
Yeah.
And that's why Jonathan goes to the castle. It's like, oh, I'm sure everything's great. Just like, and we're like, you moron. Like, what are you doing?
Turn
Like,
around.
Right. They're literally saying, oh, well, I hope you made everything right with your, I mean, it's just like,
But if that were you and you were a solicitor's clerk or a solicitor and you were on your way, you would be like, oh, these superstitious peasants.
No, but I wouldn't though, because I would think that there was at least some sort of like corresponding natural thing that was true.
Maybe not you, but the average Westerner would look at this and think, well, these are just culturally backwards people, and I have a job to do.
Right. And so
I just want to do
he's
my
a solicitor,
job.
right?
I
mean, he's there for business, right? That's all he's got on his mind.
Yeah. Well, and I almost think that like the story clearly is not in any way trying to say, oh, that's all superstition. It's actually trying to say there's more to the world than you know, right? And that ultimately, not knowing that there's more to the world does not allow you to understand the story that you're in. And by not understanding the story that you're in, you're not going to fight the battle that you need to fight because you're not going to realize the battle that you're in. And ultimately, then that connects to what we've been talking about. Then if the battle is a main battle is against the devil to save your women, and you don't realize that it's a supernatural battle that's occurring, you're going to think that these are just natural developments as you progress, just like the Enlightenment believed. As you evolve, as you progress, these are just progressive things that occur, and there's nothing spiritual happening to women. They're fine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the spiritual connection being that Dracula is not his fate is not separated from yours. In that like everyone was tempted at one point to give up or to fail, right? So Jonathan, when he's at the beginning, when he's at the castle and he goes where he's not supposed to, and the women show up, like he in his journal, right? He's like, I can't help myself. They're coming, like the excitement, right? He's like he can't rip himself away, even if he wanted to.
Yeah.
he saw the impending doom coming, and then like Mina, right? She wants to kill herself at one point. She's like, I'm just gonna end it, right? And then Van Helsing at the end, right? There's this like
he has that fit of hysterics after what goes on with Lucy, where he just loses.
Oh yeah, right, yeah. So like it's affirming like total depravity. It's affirming like in us, like we will do what Dracula wants us to do. Like our nature wants us to do that. Our nature is to give in to the women that come into the room. Our nature is to say, well, this is too much. I can't handle it. Or like, well, I'm doomed anyway. I might as well just, give up.
Well, when Jonathan's talking about escaping, he literally thinks he's not going to escape. He's just going to fall on the rocks and die.
Yeah. Right. Right.
And Arthur has to be held back by Van Helsing because Lucy's like, "Oh, come give me a kiss."
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah.
Van Helsing is
Arthur
like, not for your life, and he pushes him back.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it's like if not for something else, then we would have gone that way, right? So there's like someone has to come in place of us to stop us from doing that. And of course, John in this case, like Dracula stops it even. So even like, and there's this idea that even like God is so in control that the devil himself can actually be used in the end to bring him down, bring himself down. Because if he had killed Jonathan, he would have probably succeeded, right? But he got in the way and pretty much sealed his own fate by letting Jonathan go and not letting the women do what they wanted.
Yeah, people interpret that as, oh, well, Dracula came in and said that Jonathan was his, and so this is actually,
Oh, like
a reference to
homosexually? Oh
homosexuality, and
yeah,
because
garbage.
Bram Stoker was friends with Oscar Wilde, that must mean that he was a homosexual and he had all these, latent desires, and it's like
Yeah. Again,
when
eisegesis,
we
right? What
I
what
and at go ahead.
what's the name of the boat?
Oh, so in the book, the name of the boat is the Demeter. In
Right.
real life, the name of the boat is Dimitri, and it was a real boat
Yeah.
that existed, that was carrying plots of or like boxes of earth,
Well, do you
and
know
there
who
was
Demeter is?
oh well, Demeter is like a Greek god or
It's
a
a Greek
Roman
god.
god
It's a Greek goddess.
goddess.
It's the goddess of family. It's the goddess of it's a goddess of family and the basically prosperity, but like familial prosperity and whatnot. I just thought it was interesting, just one more support of what we're talking about in terms
Yeah.
of the men on the ship could not protect the woman that is the boat, because they basically were not equipped to. They weren't expecting the fight. They didn't know the fight they were in until it was too late. One by one, they go crazy. The one throws himself in the sea. I think it's even suggested that they all actually threw themselves in the sea.
Except for the
at some
captain,
point.
yeah.
Yeah, except for the captain. He actually kills the captain, doesn't he? What happens?
No,
Or
I
does
think
the captain kill himself?
I think he just dies from like
No, yeah, the captain, he like
the elements.
lashes himself. Yeah, he
Yeah.
lashes himself onto the um the
The
wheel
wheel.
of the ship,
Uh-huh.
and he ends up he dies of like the elements and everything.
Just trying to get the boat to shore or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. But I just thought,
That's a
again, that was
mockery. I think Dracula's
another,
mocking him.
but just another sort of like that idea that if again the men are just not prepared for it. And I think it's interesting now to learn that the boat wasn't called that before.
No, it wasn't.
And that he
The
changed
real
it.
boat, yeah, he did change it because the real boat is called the Dimitri, and
Yeah.
it was an actual boat
Yeah.
that ran aground. Like that actually did happen in Whitby, and there was a dog that ran off of it.
Yeah.
It
So
was
he
a
literally
real
changed
event.
it from male to female.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never caught that. Yeah, I think there are a lot of assumptions that people make about Dracula and what the story is going to be about. That's why whenever I tell people like this is my favorite book, is it the best book I've ever read? No. There are books that are better written. It's my favorite book because I do think there are a lot of really great themes in it. But when you tell people that, they immediately just think of, cartoonish vampires and the way that
Yeah.
it's been portrayed in pop culture, the way that it's been perverted in pop culture, where it's like all sexual without any substance.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest complaint that I have, is that there's a lack of taking it seriously and going back to the idea that these people actually believed that vampires were real and true. There was a real terror to it, that now we just find laughable. I think it's important for us as Christians to go back and to read, even like as I was looking into Dracula, I was like, oh, where did he get these ideas from? And he was Irish, and he probably got the idea from an Irish legend. And it was there was an Irish vampire that was the chieftain of a town, and he came back alive and would demand blood. He was a horrible chieftain, and at one point in the legend, he's scaling a wall. So the comparisons are pretty accurate. But the idea is that the Irish people, to them, this isn't a fairy tale. They believe that this is true. There's a place in Ireland that you can actually see where this chieftain is supposedly buried. So there is, for Bram Stoker even, there would have been a reality to this, that in conveying the theological ideas, it's not like, oh, well, here's a nice story and I'm conveying something true. It's like, here's something true and I'm going to tell you something that is also eternally true in it.
Yeah. Well, of course you had all the stories about Vlad, although I don't think this
Which
book
is
ever
probably
connects
not
Vlad.
no, it's most of like the Dracula scholars do not think that this book is in any way connected to Vlad.
Okay, I think the reason why people probably do that is because it's Transylvania, right? So it's like,
Well, he calls himself a Hun.
yeah,
He's a descendant of Attila the Hun.
yeah.
I mean, I think there's. Well, I'm not a scholar. I mean, but I saw some meshing. Like, I mean, he talks about his exploits during when the Muslims were coming in, and he was fighting the Muslims.
Well, yeah, maybe that's where people connected.
And that's exactly what Vlad did, except he won. I think Dracula loses, right, and retreats.
But I was surprised just because we automatically connect the two, right? Like Dracula is Vlad.
Yeah.
Whereas the book it never explicitly makes that connection.
Okay, that led me to something I wanted to remind me of something I wanted to say. The idea that the beginning just kind of laid out all its cards, right? Like, in modern storytelling, it's like you never know what a character is until like the end, right?
Yeah.
Like you're like, oh, it could be good, could be bad, and that's the mystery.
Yeah.
And Dracula is
that's not a mystery here.
Not a mystery, but then it makes him more mysterious. Yeah. Because you're like, where did he come from? Was he the first vampire? Yeah. Why is he so powerful? Where did he get these girls from? Why is he in a castle? Why does he want to go to London? Like,
but even all the powers he has, they're never fully explained.
They're never fully
explained.
So
how can he do all these things?
Yeah, so like I felt like I intimately knew Dracula, but at the same time didn't. But knowing what I knew made it more compelling. He was more.
It makes him a scarier figure, right? Because ultimately, not only that, but he's not afraid. He's not hiding.
Yeah.
Like he literally, like, who he is, and he has no fear of it or whatever. In fact, the whole town knows who he is. And tries to tell Jonathan that or whatever.
Yeah, like when the mother shows up at the castle, her baby goes missing. She shows up at the castle. She knows
exactly what happens.
Who took the baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a secret. I mean, and that's the thing. All the powers that he had, so materializing, dematerializing, and controlling mist and all these types of things. This is all connected to like pre-enlightenment folklores about vampires that people believed.
Well, and who is his greatest enemy in the book? My favorite character, I think Drake, it's your favorite character. Van Helsing, right?
Van Helsing. Yeah.
And you would think, well, Van Helsing, he's just a superstitious guy, but actually he's not. He actually is the most rational of them. And it's interesting that the most rational of them leads him to a supernatural conclusion. And so he ends up being the greatest foe because he's not just some superficial guy, nor is he some enlightenment guy who's wrapped up into science who cannot see the supernatural. The Dracula would love that, right? The devil loves that, right? It's just, you don't even see me now. I can work and you won't even know it. But he's the guy who's so reasonable that he actually comes to the supernatural conclusion and becomes the greatest foe to Dracula because he can see him. And he gets others to see him. He helps others see him now. And at the end of the day, he now, because he's so noble, he's the nobleman. He is the man of great character. He's gonna try to save these women, which is why I think he goes berserk when he doesn't save Lucy, right?
Yeah.
Because ultimately, like, he's like, man, that was like his sole purpose, and he just lost her. But then we see him kind of redeem himself there in saving Mina. And so he's that nobleman that is the greatest foe because he's going to protect these women. He's going to try to save these women. Whereas the rest of the people who are either filled with supernaturalism and too terrified to do anything, or they're so scientific they can't see him, and they're no help to the women. And I just see, like, At first, I wanted to say, "Oh, he's the Christ figure," but it's clear that he's not because he has too many flaws and all that. I think in the end, he's just the noble, rational, and I would say clearly Christian man.
He's the mature Christian,
right? He's the Christian man who's going to, in his resolve, save the women and bring them into what is godliness.
He's going to save the women. He's going to save entire family lines.
Right, because what's the very last paragraph is about the fact that Mina has a child. Yeah. And that there it is. Yeah. We defeated Dracula, not just because we killed Dracula, but because family now will thrive. Now the noble woman with her noble man will have a child, and now the devil's been defeated.
And that's
go ahead.
I would say Van Helsing makes that point when he says, like, this isn't about a battle versus like two men, right? He says, like, this is a battle from another race coming about on Earth, right? Like, something taking life. This isn't just like a vendetta against another guy.
Yeah,
trying to one up him. This is literally saving humanity.
This isn't just between people who think, oh, I think women should be homemakers. Well, I think women should be in the workplace. And they're all just naturally thinking. This is a cosmic, spiritual battle and that we absolutely must win.
Well, and Van Helsing actually makes this point pretty explicitly in one of the chapters. He says something like, Mina shouldn't be included anymore in their councils of war because one day, she may bear children. It's like he makes an allusion to this as like she needs to be kept out of this and protected for that reason.
Yeah,
and she submits.
Yeah,
and she submits to it. She's like, okay, I understand.
And she doesn't
that's what's so great about this book is that you have so many garbage books with like the strong female lead, and she's basically just a man in women's clothing.
Right.
Like she does not act like a woman at all. Whereas Mina, she actually acts like a woman. She submits to her husband. She submits to their, the authority of Van Helsing when he's saying, hey, that you shouldn't be included. And she lets the men lead her. And then she inputs as she's allowed to in a way that is feminine.
And she participates in the destruction of the devil figure, but in her own way. And if she had not done it, if she'd done it the same way the guys would have done it, then she wouldn't have been the servant collecting the material. She wouldn't have stayed back to where she wouldn't be influenced by maybe the other vampiresses or whatever you want to call them, to where she could then give that howl out. Like she actually helps by being the woman. And that's how she contributes in the war. It's not that she doesn't contribute at all. She contributes a great deal. In fact, they cannot overcome. I'm reminded again of Genesis 2, right? It's not good for the man to be on his own. He cannot accomplish the defeat of chaos without her. And so ultimately she's needed, but she's needed as a woman, not as a man. God didn't make Adam and Steve, not just because it's like, oh, well, he didn't want homosexuals. God didn't make Adam and Steve because the woman as a woman is needed to overcome chaos and the devil.
So, you already have like 4 men. Right. Let's just have another one.
They all trip over each other. And honestly, they all trip over each other. Like one of the most, Brian, you brought up like Van Helsing being the most rational, but being the most metaphysical.
Yeah,
I'm using the Enlightenment term. But like one of the most rational things he convinces the men that kind of trip over each other, trying to like figure this thing out, is when they're trying to like decide how to get into Dracula's house in London, right? Like, do we go at night in the back like robbers? And Van Helsing's like, how about we go during the day when everyone just assumes you're supposed to be there? And they're like, genius, like.
and then Arthur's like, oh yeah, and I'm a lord now, so that works.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So
Arthur's just throwing his money around. He's just there for the title and the money.
Yeah. Right. So like, Van Helsing's, everyone else is just tripping over each other. They would have been caught, right? They ruined everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of makes you wonder why Lucy chose Arthur.
Oh, I'm sure he was
like,
well.
oh, you can be the doctor. You can have the doctor of the insane asylum. No thanks. You can you can have this like American caricature. No thanks. Or you can have Arthur. He's a lord.
It's like you've seen Downton Abbey, right?
Yeah.
She like chooses all the other, not the one she shouldn't have chosen.
Yeah. That's a great show.
That is a fantastic show. Should do a Patreon episode on that.
I'm down. I haven't watched Downton in a long time.
Yeah, I barely remember. It was so many years ago. It was a good show.
It was a fantastic show.
It was stupendous. Any other words on Dracula, or are we all out?
I don't know.
I'm trying to think. Like, and there. Oh, so okay. Here's some complaints. All right.
Okay. What are your complaints?
I've said one already.
Not enough action.
Yeah, the iconography and the relic stuff. That's obviously the biggest complaint.
Right. I think it's obviously in Bram, his mind, the power of God is in stuff.
Right. Which is strange because as far as I know, he was also raised Protestant. So
it might have been, yeah. And at first I thought he was kind of like he was critiquing Roman Catholicism at first, but then he kind of
just leaned in.
Yeah, he leans in more.
Now that you say that, I wonder if he's using the relics in Roman Catholicism, because there's this scene where I forget who's saying it. He's talking about the effectiveness of the relics, and he's asking the question as to whether they're effective because they themselves hold some sort of power, whether they actually represent some idea. And for that, I was like, okay, maybe he's using Roman Catholicism and the relics to really communicate what the higher ideas do to the devil. That it's not really literally a steak, it's not really garlic, it's not really holy water. It's actually what the ideas that those represent, which is Christianity itself, and maybe what the Christian character that Christianity makes of people that really defeat the devil in the end. I mean, that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, because I did think he was critiquing them at first, but then once they started actually doing, and I don't remember that conversation, but once they started actually, protecting everyone, then I was like, it seems like they're just using it as relics would be used. But so I guess that I'll still use that as a critique. The other one was the development of Quincy, and I do feel like the third act was rushed.
Yeah, I will say this time, I haven't felt like this in the past, but this time reading it, I got to the end and I was like, that was a little dissatisfying.
Yeah.
Yeah. I felt that this time.
The third act, as in the
end of
the last
book.
act, right? Yeah. I felt like Lucy was strung out. The whole
Lucy
that was like
in more ways
literally strung out, Brian.
But I mean, in terms of like the whole section about her, I was like, I was going through it, I was like, I read something saying that Mina was like the top character, and I was like, it can't be. It's got to be Lucy. This is like, it's spending most time on Lucy. And that was really, and then the end came. It was like boom, 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 and it was done.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, the ending was rushed.
Yeah, and maybe this is my 21st century entertainment brain, but like I anticipated, because it was even building up like, oh, it's getting dark, and you see the carriage, and
you think that he's still gonna like come out, right?
Yeah, what he does, kind of. I mean, he opens his eyes, and he gives that.
Yeah. I wish it would have frozen right then.
And then he gets stabbed in the throat. and then he just goes to ashes, and it's like,
Yeah.
wait, what?
But did he go to ashes,
Well,
or did
that's
he
the-
just dematerialize and he's somewhere
Yeah, I
else
mean,
now?
see,
Oh,
I
is
thought
that
that
what
too. I was
some
like,
people say?
well, yeah,
That's
I
what
mean,
I
there is like
say.
a, did they
Is
kill
he
him?
still around?
Because they didn't cut his head off. They
Wait.
didn't.
I thought they did. I thought that was the whole point of they stabbed him in the throat, but didn't they cut his head off and fill his mouth with garlic?
No, he just evaporates, right?
I don't think they do.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I was
But
like,
I'm
oh,
not
I do remember he turns to ash. I do remember that part.
yeah.
And of course, I mean, they take Lucy's head off, but I thought they did it with him. Maybe not. Oh, you know what? I think they do it with the brides, don't
Yeah,
they?
he takes the bride's
Yeah, they
head.
do it with the brides.
Okay,
Yeah.
That's what it was. Not.
That's why I was like,
Dracula.
well, why is Dracula different?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was like a miracle, but before our very eyes and almost in the drawing of a breath, the whole body crumbled into dust and passed from our sight.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
hate
but-
this. This is the part I hate the most. More than the relics. This is the thing I hate the most. I shall be glad as long as I live that even in that moment of final dissolution, there was in the face a look of peace, such as I never could have imagined might have rested there. Bleh. No. Dracula cannot be redeemed. No.
Well, this goes back to Mina's point where like he was one,
No.
you know.
Yeah, I hate
was
that.
like
I hate
me.
the like inclusivity of basically anyone at the end. Like they're dead, right? They're now the undead, and now you're somehow just by staking them gonna send them into a blissful eternity.
Wow. Yeah.
He was just a
No.
victim.
Well,
No.
the same thing was said of Lucy, right? She's going to heaven
Yeah, I
now
hate
and
it.
all that.
Yeah, no, I hate it.
Yeah. Well, obviously he has to be dead because it freed Mina from the thing.
Well, right. Yeah, free from the curse.
I mean,
That's a good point.
I think that's clear. I mean, I don't know how you'd get anything else from that. If he was alive, then she'd still be bound.
So I have a copy. I have a lot of copies of Dracula. I have a copy of Dracula that's annotated, and it's by a scholar who is writing it as if it's all real. Like he's writing
okay.
all of his commentary, taking Bram Stoker at his word that it's real. So he's like dissecting the timetables, like, okay, did he get the information? Is this actually factual? And going through all of these details. And he has this theory. It's kind of a stupid theory that after Dr. Seward goes and, they take care of Lucy, and now he's gotten a taste of blood and destroying the, voluptuous vampire vixen, that he becomes Jack the Ripper.
Jack the Ripper. I thought you were going to say like Dracula 2 or something.
Oh,
no,
right.
he becomes Jack the Ripper because his name is Jack Seward. So he's like, he wanted to destroy the like harlots, and so now he's Jack the Ripper. I was like,
this was written during,
that's
wasn't that going on during when he wrote it?
Yeah, I think so.
The murders were going on at that time. Yeah.
There's all. What'd you say?
Was it after he wrote it, or like?
Let me look. I will look it up.
I thought Jack the Ripper was a little bit before this, which would make sense if it's being written after the fact, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think, it probably was after. If it's
Jack the Ripper was an unidentified serial killer active in and around the impoverished Whitechapel district in 1888. So that was another of the the reasons why I guess the Bram Stoker's editor didn't want this as real, because he was worried about the hysteria.
Yeah, freak everybody out.
Yeah. So yeah.
And this is why we shouldn't be putting skeletons in our front yard for Halloween. Like we don't want to be on Dracula's side.
I was
that
waiting
was
for,
a left turn.
Wait a minute. All right. We'll wait for this to develop.
We're just obsessed with that. Like everyone's obsessed.
I told my kids when we were walking up to co-op on Friday, and man, Brian's neighborhood is filled with like there's
I
a
know.
humongous skeleton. It's
I feel like more
crazy.
people decorate for Halloween around here than Christmas.
It's crazy.
Same.
I told my kids, I was like, so this is just our anatomy lesson. Here's a skeleton.
No, yeah.
Everyone's really
Cranium.
interested. Everyone's
shin
really
bone's connected
interested
to
in
the-
anatomy.
Yeah, it is interesting though how we're fascinated with death, and yet I imagine people who read this book, it's the same thing, right? They're looking for that like occultic feel or whatever, but the book is very Christian.
Very.
Yeah, it is. Which
and
is part of why people hate it, and they want to try to read it in a queer way or whatever.
Or distort.
reading.
Like I told you, I started
Yeah.
watching the movie. I had to shut it off. Now
I've never seen the movie.
The 1992 one?
Right, the one with Winona Ryder and Keanu Reeves. Now I understand why they started doing the sexual thing. It would have been interesting to watch and see what they try to do with things, but again, it just it's garbage in it. So, but you can see what people are fascinated with the occultic aspect, and yet, for the most part, everything I've heard from Dracula completely misses the message of what this book actually is conveying, which again is a biblical Christian message, I think.
Yeah.
That's the other complaint that I go ahead, Drake.
Oh, sorry. I mean to talk over you. I was saying that the sad thing is people want eternal life. They want to like live, they want to be immortal, but they want to be immortal like Dracula is.
On their own terms.
On their own terms. So yeah, I'll be a skeleton. I'll make fun of death because I would want to live like that forever.
Mm-hmm.
When they're fascinated with secret things, the occultic things, again, because it's special knowledge or whatever, and yet they ignore the special knowledge given in scripture, right? That's actually right in front of their faces. So they want to almost have this knowledge of the supernatural, and it fascinates them while ignoring what God actually wants them to know. And so for me, I see it also as a distraction. In many ways, as again, like someone who would take the Dracula story and just make you distracted toward the occult when the story is actually about something completely different.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of an irony in our culture to where they think they're spiritual, but spirituality is paying attention to the message you've been given, not seeking some occultic information, that isn't given to you.
Well, and that's why I hate when all the Dracula portrayals and all the vampire stuff becomes hypersexualized. And it's like, yes, there are sexual elements and themes in Dracula, but they're done in like an Alfred Hitchcock way, not in a modern pornographic way. And what I mean by that is like Alfred Hitchcock was really adept at being very subtle with his sexual themes. Like you would have things, I don't know if I want to even go into it, but it's like he would, instead of just showing you a couple and showing you something that was pornographic, he would hint at it in the way that he would use like a train going through a tunnel. He'd show the couple
like euphemistically or something.
Yes, he would show the couple going into, the train car. The door would close. You would see nothing.
Yeah.
And then the train would go through the tunnel. And you're like, okay, I know what happened. You don't need to see it. It doesn't need to be hypersexual.
Well, and ironically, the book is trying to save women from that type of society, right? That's kind of the whole point, is that we don't want women even portrayed in film or books or whatever that way, because we don't want them to aspire to that sort of, again, like whorish culture or whatever. So even like to have this movie, for instance, that I was watching, and have women then who are portrayed and doing things that are the opposite of what Stoker was trying to go for in the book, is just, again, it's an irony of our culture just not getting the point of the book.
Yeah.
I thought Mina's description of what happened after Dracula did what he did was like, I think he got across like the horror and the violation and like the disgust of what was forced on her really clearly.
Yeah.
And it's like, that is a, it's not a descriptive element. It is, because obviously it's a fictional character, so it's descriptive. But it's like this is what every woman deep down does feel like when they when either they go into that, they allow that to happen to them, or it is forced upon them, right? And they become something like that.
Well, and I think if you're any sort of noble man, you like read that and it makes you angry, right? Like you immediately it calls you to action and makes you realize, oh, this is what the devil is doing to our women. No way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly had that when I read it. I was like, I really hope like when they outsmart him, that it's like really, really like in his face.
And it
why I was disappointed when it kind of wasn't.
Well,
it wasn't his face.
It literally was in his face.
It was in his face, but it was like
it was a little anticlimactic. It is. The ending is anticlimactic.
Yeah, you did think that like he was going to come out and they were going to have this epic battle.
Yeah.
Or whatever, but
they can't. But
there's more of a battle with the brides and the night.
But the thing is, they couldn't actually do that because he's so much more powerful than them. That there's no way if he was actually out of the box. There's no way.
You tie garlic to his leg and you're like, I can't get away.
Yeah, there's no way you'd be able to actually do anything.
Yeah. I did. What was that they put around the
campground?
I'm
glad that I forced you guys to read it.
Well, he put the wafers.
Yeah, it was.
He put, like,
it was
wafer crumbs
the wafer.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it was crushed up, and it was
a lot of wafers.
So the life of Christ saved them from the demonic forces or whatever.
The transubstantiation of Christ saved them from.
Yeah, I'm glad you forced us to read it too. It really was. I was not expecting it to be a Christian book.
I wasn't either.
Yeah. Hey, that's a good freeze for April right there. Really. A big smile on your face or whatever.
What? How was I?
You just had a giant smile on your face and was frozen for like a minute. But I wasn't expecting it to be a Christian book. I thought it had maybe themes that you were interested in. I didn't realize you loved it because it was actually very, really forces of darkness versus forces of good. And
I was expecting like an old version of Dune or something. I don't know why. I was like, it's just going to be some weirdo.
Yeah. Well, when I started reading it, it was like a bunch of like
awesome book.
Letters and diaries. I was like, oh man, this is going to be like drudging through all this or whatever. But it was actually interesting.
You know what's funny is the way
it's called an epistolary novel.
Yeah, it was
good. Bible is an epistolary novel. So like what I liked was because it was written that way, it was easier to like remember what was happening. Mm-hmm. Like I could partition in my mind all these events, and they didn't just kind of like flow together, right? Like, oh yeah, this day, and it's not. It doesn't have. It's only like what 2 months, because like the diaries start in like June, right, or July.
It starts.
I thought it was longer.
No, it starts at the beginning of May.
So Jonathan shows up in May. That's right. Jonathan shows up in May.
It ends at the end of October or November.
Yeah. November.
It's over. It's like over a summer and the beginning of fall.
Yeah. So you're really bad summer camp.
Yeah. I don't know what to think about this, but I thought about it because as I was reading at least the beginning entries or whatever, he was constantly mentioning like what he was eating. And I was trying to figure out how is that connected? Like, because it seems so weird to like tonight I had chicken and it's like, why are you? Why is this in the novel and in his thing? Like, what is the point of? And I'm not sure how it's connected, but obviously then there's a lot about consumption of blood and food and things, and obviously the book gets a lot deeper, and maybe it's just showing the superficiality of his thinking versus
that's what I thought it was,
the realization of the larger world, that it's beyond just what you're eating and all that garbage. There's something more than you realize. So that might be connected in that way.
Well, it also like adds to the realism. It adds to the realism of like, what are you going to be doing when you're traveling? You're going to be writing about the food and frivolous things until things actually kick off. The interesting thing though is that the book doesn't technically start here. So the original manuscript, it's like there are 100 pages before that.
Oh, really?
I'm just gonna make up the Beggar's Canyon rating system. And I think all three of us are gonna give 2 thumbs up.
Yep.
Yeah. Read it, enjoy it, talk. You can even talk with us about it. You can comment about it. Everyone's watching this, and it is obviously October, so it's a good month to maybe start reading this kind of like every season. I think it's always fun to kind of pick a book series and find seasonal times to read stuff. I know I do that with different books and whatnot. But so yeah, thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks for watching the discussion. Looking forward to seeing what you guys thought. And if Dracula is your favorite book, maybe like you're like, wow, finally 3 more people in the world actually appreciate this novel. Yeah, comment. So if you want to support us, join Patreon. This is kind of a sneak peek, and this is what we do. We talk about books, and we enjoy each other's company, enjoy you guys watching, have some beverages. I ran out actually this time. I'm not lying.
Oh, good. You're honest about it.
I'm honest about it this time. I'm not sure what book we'll be discussing next, but we have quite a laundry list. So join Patreon and like and subscribe. We will see you next time. Peace.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
That was so delayed.
That was great. Haven't read the series, might not understand what would need to happen.
Have you read all of them?
I've read all of Frank Herbert's novels. Yes.
Oh, you've read all of them. I've only read the first one because my grandma told me that the other ones were bad.
Let me just start with this. Frank Herbert is not a good storyteller. Not a good storyteller. He's a fantastic world builder.
Harry and I, we're pals. Harry and I were
Harry the Henderson.
You grew up at Hogwarts?
The first book came out. Harry and I were around the same age, and so I grew up with books. Like the last book came out when I was 19, and Harry was around 19. This, I went to a Christian high school, so this was a big deal. It was a big thing. Harry Potter is evil, and you can't be reading this or participating in this.
The reason why I like Moby Dick so much is, to me, there's a parallel with Genesis. So it's actually history. It's history that Melville he's interviewed. This actually occurred to a bunch of whalers.
Yeah.
And the survivors he interviewed.
Yeah.
And it became this book. But notice how he's writing this history. It's not, here's all the facts that happened. All right, the end. He's writing it because he wants to put meaning and a message to what has occurred.